What's going on, GBA fans? My name is Berk, and today we'll be bringing you the Week 10 Power Rankings for the GBA Season 6. With me, some guy, these intros are just getting worse and worse. There's Trav.
Last week's was so good, and then that was that.
You can't expect me to make them good every week. That's too much effort on my part.
You're not big on effort.
I'm not. At number 16, we have the Milwaukee Sawsbucks. So, Battler X, he has officially been eliminated from the playoffs, so basically he's just going in this with some fun teams. Magic Room with setup is cool. It's a bold strategy. I've seen it once before in a different league.
Shout out to H2O Drinker.
Know.
Yep.
Yeah. And it didn't work then. It didn't work now because he let his Magic Room user die. So it's really hard to use if you don't have it. And I guess there's a difference between, viable, innovative, and creative sets and just inviable creative sets. Like, I just don't see Magic Room using that to set up and then trying to sweep with it as a very viable set. Really, he didn't have a way to deal with Suicune on his team. No Electivire, no, I can't believe I'm saying this, no Sawsbuck. So it was just kind of able to deal with his entire team. I mean, he played well, despite having like two Mons that can't really do much because they rely on Magic Room. But with nothing to really deal with Suicune and Kyurem, he just kind of lost it.
So, Battler X, I get Psych Up on Slowbro is a cool bring, but I have no idea why he didn't just bring Carmine, because whenever Suicune comes in and starts setting up, you can switch straight into Slowbro and start getting at Carmine. And if it had Carmine Slowbro, he would have won that game. Towards the end game, you probably could have Carmine it up. For a team with the likes of Mega Pinsir and Honchkrow, he somehow didn't have enough for Newcastle's bulk this week. The Kyurem and Suicune in particular,
Battler X, your singing is pretty good.
It was a really good song. If you had it, yeah.
So at number 15, we have the Newcastle United. Sam didn't upload, so I'm not really going to talk about him.
I like bulky Kyurem.
Cool.
That's it.
So at my number 14 and your number 13, we have the San Jose Dumpster Fires. You can talk about him.
Tom basically won this match up until the point where he just got distracted and then lost the match. And I mean, if you watched it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He had all the checks and counters really, really well, and then got a phone call during the match, got multiple phone calls during the match apparently. Got distracted and then sacked off his entire team for Alligator and let it set up to +3, only to realize that Milotic actually still walled it. Because even with crunch, like a +3 crunch from the Feraligatr did like 35 to 40%, I think, to Milotic, which is just ridiculous with Mile scale. He, up until that point, was playing amazingly. He used Xatu incredibly well. Like, Xatu is one of those mons that I've never really considered in League format, and it was able to 1v1 Mega Venusaur effectively. Managed to use Spec Starmie to just blow back that Mega Venusaur. He had answers for things. He pivoted really well around the Jolteon, let it rack up toxic damage. He pivoted well around the Darmanitan, let it rack up Flare Blitz damage, and really just whittled down Nick's team amazingly well, and then just threw it all away in those last couple of turns. Most of the sets were fairly, I guess, standard, but they were effective for what they did. Things like Spec Starmie, he's brought it a lot, but it's been useful. He's been using offensive Starmie a lot, and it's been really good for him. It was good for him again this week, but I get that you got distracted, but it was just watching the battle afterwards, kind of just depressing to watch your entire team just die turn after turn while you have a Milotic sitting there which can take the hit. Other than that, played really well, and that's all I have to say.
I mean, the Milotic wasn't necessarily going to be able to kill the Feraligatr because it was paralyzed. Getting full paired like 4 turns in a row is a thing, so this was the match from hell, and he couldn't really get it done, and then when he tried to, he was really distracted throughout the end game, which he's been playing so well this half of the season. It's just unfortunate to see him get distracted and lose, because I'm very, very, very confident that had he gone to Melodic and had a Melodic actually taken care of the Gator, not gotten haxed out, he would have won this match. Tom, next time, if you get distracted like this, and you see that you're facing something that has set up, Go into your defensive mon. Doesn't matter. Just go into it. You're distracted. He's doing really well, and I know that in like future seasons, because I'm pretty sure he's I think mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. I don't know. But I know in future seasons that he's going to be a huge threat because he can play very well despite not having a great record this season. So my number 13 and your number 14, we have the San Francisco Giants. And this battle, I feel like Gio could have won this battle. I like this planning. I like how he speed creeps. Miguel speed creeps. You know how Miguel plans, and he knows that he likes to speed creep a lot. And so he, like with the Regirock, so he speed creeped his own Mega Absol because he knew that Miguel was going to speed creep that with the Weavile instead of putting in a lot of speed. Weakness Policy, Rock Polish Regirock is a pretty good set. I didn't really think it had the real means of sweeping just because Miguel's team is very bulky and it can take hits and then take out the Regirock. But then again, Regirock is also stupidly bulky, so the Howl, Lychee Berry, Natural Gift Entei, like that's the innovation we like to see from Gio, and we know that he does really well, and that actually could have won him the game at the end, you know. And the dual Healing Wish, Healing Wish, Lunar Dance. I didn't really know if he needed both. It was interesting, but, you know, in the game, you know, he played poorly around the Registeel. He just kind of let it sit on the field, whittle down his team. He didn't make the offensive switch. It's a Registeel, go into your Entei, scare it out, but he just kind of made some misplays early game that really whittled down his team. But he was able to make some really, really good plays, like using the Natural Gift Grassberry to take out the Mega Blastoise out. It just worked absolutely to perfection. Some like mid-game misplays around the Golurk, but I think he played the end game very well. He put himself in a place to win by going for the Howl with Entei, knowing that after rocks he could take out the Talonflame. He could take out the Uxie with a Uxie with a +2 extreme speed, and then I think Miguel had the Registeel, which wouldn't have been able to kill with either move and would die to a Sacred Fire. You know, he played that endgame well, but then, you know, Paras happened, and once he got too much damage on the Entei, then it wouldn't have been able to take any move from the Registeel, and he just kind of lost the game. So I think it was well played by Gio, but it's just those unfortunate endgame Paras just kind of did him in.
I don't really have too much to add. I mean, Regirock, the Weakness Policy Rock Polish set is cool, but it's just slow and not that powerful. Like, base on 100 is good, but doesn't have great stabs and doesn't have amazing coverage. But I do like the set, and definitely, I really like this from Gio, honestly. The team was a lot better than I've seen the past few weeks, and, you know, not seeing Choiced Entei again was really, really cool. And this is the kind of Entei set that has made everyone in League format give it so much more respect than it used to have.
Alright, so at number 12, we have the New York Metapod, so you can talk about Dan.
So Dan, given in the first couple of weeks, he basically played bulky, stally kind of teams, and then managed to see him bring hyper offense this week. He was determined to get Sticky Webs up, and he brought a lot of just straight up power. Dragon Dance, Mega Altaria, Choice Banded, Adamant Victini, Life Orb, Metachamp, stuff like that, which just punches holes in any sort of team. The thing when you're playing George is never discount anything insane, because George is insane. He can bring just the most ridiculous things. You did well sort of figuring out the Beedrill had Defog. I would have liked to see him preserve the Galvantula until after he managed to bait out the Beedrill and kill it with something else, just because it meant that as soon as he set up Sticky Webs, George brings in the Beedrill and just gets a free defog off on something, because even at -1 that thing is so crazy fast, was able to defog before taking a hit. The main issue with Dan this week, like, he managed to win, but he mentioned that, you know, the wedding and all that stuff obviously took away from his own planning. He had to get other people to basically build his team for him, and he tweaked a couple of things, but he still managed to play really, really well. He still knew what his win conditions were, knew how he could win the game towards the end game, like the fact that he had to stay in on a Manaphy at -1 with his Victini. At that point, a Scald or a Surf probably killed from a max special attack Manaphy. I'm not 100% sure, but, you know, it's super effective at -1 split effort. But he knew he had to stay in case George Tailglowed, just get off the damage, and end up getting a crit. I mean, even though it was a crit, the fact that a Choice Banded V-Crate is able to do 70%-ish to a Manaphy is just absolutely insane. Like, it's just It's just so powerful. In any case, he played well around the Manaphy in the late game, which you can argue whether or not, without the crit, whether he would have won or not, but he definitely still had a chance because of the Yachi berries, because of the switches you could have made around the Mamoswine to stall it out to Life Orb, but then fake out Bullet Punch it. So I really like the fact that instead of trying to defensively check everything, bringing Rotom Wash to deal with Mamoswine, bringing Chansey to deal with every special attacker ever, try and wear things down with Toxic and Status, he decided to go a lot more offensive and bring offensive checks to things, which ended up being the right choice this week, mostly because if you try to have a defensive check to the Mamoswine in that late game, it would have ended up probably getting worn down and dying, instead of which he had the offensive check of Medicham, so even if the Victini hadn't got the crit, he would have had another way to take out that Mamoswine in the end.
I mean, he did have a defensive check to Mamoswine being the Rotom Wash.
He did,
so.
But my point was more the overall team structure was offensive checks to everything.
Yeah, I like the team. Choice Band and Victini, I mean, what's the switch into V-Create? The answer is there is no switch into V-Create. He's been using Medicham really well this season. It's cool seeing it do work, because it's one of those mons that the Mega, yeah, Mega's cool, Mega hits really hard, but you never really see the regular Medicham actually do things. I mean, he did well to try to bring in Victini anytime he could once the Snorlax went down, because with no Snorlax, that means there's pretty much no resistance to Choice Band Victini's V-Create, because an offensive Manaphy is not a switch into V-Create, really. It is once, and then it is no longer, so I think he played the endgame well to secure the win. Yeah, the crit sucked, but I think he would still have the win. I don't know. I didn't do all the calcs. I don't know how much Fake Out plus Bullet Punch would have done, plus the run of Life Orb, and the plays would have been a very careful plays towards the end if the crit didn't happen. But I think that Dan still could have had the match. So at number 11 we have the Utah Jasmine, and Cooper brought a very Cooper team this week. No T-Wave on Clef. I think T-Wave would have been a very good bring this week because it's T-Wave, Yell Magic, best magic. Bring Gliscor to a rain team, it's an interesting thought, but, Cooper mentioned that he had a bad matchup this week, and one thing that I've noticed is he says that about a lot of teams, that he has a bad matchup, and I think it's just the way his team is. He doesn't have switch-ins for, a lot of stuff. He doesn't have switch-in for offensive fire, and as we can see this week, he has very few switch-ins for offensive water also. The only thing reliably taking it being the Empoleon. And once the Empoleon was whittled down too much and had been taken down, he really had nothing to deal with Kingdra in the rain, and it was just Cooper let his team get very whittled down, wasn't able to Wish Pass with Clef, because Wish Passing with Clef is still not that easy. Wish Baton Passing is generally the way you want to go with Wish Passing, but I mean, he could have made some different plays towards the end, like going into the Greninja, just to kind of stall out the rain a little bit, but it was just a matter of Chimp bring back in the rain, and then setting up again. Yeah, he had a pretty bad matchup, and he lost to the rain team. That's not to say Cooper played poorly. I don't think Cooper played poorly, but, Chimp had a plan to set up a Kingdra, and Cooper played right into that plan because he had to let Empoleon take a lot of damage. He had to let his checks and counters to Kingdra go down, and once those were not there anymore, he just kind of lost to Kingdra.
I think Coop didn't play badly this week. The prep was a bit subpar. I mean, it is part of the thing of his team just struggles with a lot of things, so it's hard to prep around that, but there are a couple of things, like you mentioned, the T-Wave on Clefable could have really helped out. And honestly, the main thing is Chimp's prep was just really, really good this week, and there is nothing you can do about that. When you're facing a really good opponent and they bring something that you really didn't expect, even if it's something that is possible on their team, like he does have a Politoed, he can bring rain, but he's only done it, I think, once this season until this game. So Chimp is just demonstrating that he can, as we said all season, do backflips on his playstyle and just do whatever the hell he wants that week. And Cooper got caught off guard by it, didn't really have the defensive checks, and this is the thing with the way Cooper drafts. He likes to draft bulk, and a lot of bulk, and just, he's famous for 6/6 timer stalling people with his bulk, but this season he just doesn't have the same capacity to switch into everything because of just the way his team is built.
He doesn't have Blistos.
Yeah. Need to just franchise Blissey and get Zapdos round 1, I reckon.
At number 10, we have the New Orleans Pelipers. So, why don't you talk about John? Johnny!
One of the big things to note about John this week is he managed to basically bluff that he didn't have quick attack, or at least not reveal it until he had to. And that was something that in previous weeks I criticised him for, and this week he did really well. Managed to get the kills with Lopunny towards the end game because Lars didn't really have much for its priority. I really like the Reuniclus set because it is one of the few things that can sort of deal with Landorus, you know, if it's not carrying knockoff or U-turn, or I don't know what other moves it gets on the physical side, but lots of things. And even with those, because it was invested in special attack, it wasn't doing too much damage. He got the roll with the Earth Power, allowing him to basically clean up that game, but that's the sort of thing that happens when you have two really good players butting heads. It's going to come down to something like a roll. He's been using Cryogonal decently well, at least in the past couple of weeks. This week it was kind of just sacked off to try and get damage on things, and in particular trying to get Regenerator on Reuniclus, and this is the one issue I did have with the Assault Vest set. I get that he needed the special defense to Landorus, and I think it was the best set to bring in this scenario. The main issue with it is because it's quite slow, and because it can't stain and recover on something when it's doing, taking 30% damage, you basically have to switch out and let something else take a huge hit if you're about to get turret carried by something. So that was part of the issue, is he ended up sacking off quite a lot of monsters to try and keep their Reuniclus healthy, but it did basically wall most of Lars' team. Lars didn't bring enough to deal with it, and so Reuniclus was able to hang around, just get off a lot of damage on things until Mega Lopunny did what Mega Lopunny does and just cleans up the endgame.
And he uses the Reuniclus really well as always. Regen set just works well for John, and he was really reliant on the Reuniclus of all things. Like, he didn't have much for Lars' offense, but then again, what do you have for Scizor, Landorus, and Mega Alakazam all in one team? Not much. And I like how he was always focused on whittling down Lars' team enough that Mega Lopunny could clean up with Quick Attack. Yeah, he made some over predictions early game that set him back, but he made up for it mid and late game to be able to win. And yes, I know it came down to a roll, whether the Reuniclus is going to win, but that's what happens in like a really good battle like this one. A lot of times it comes down to a roll. And Lars is just unlucky as shit, so. Speaking of Lars, at number 9, we've got the Borussia Donphan. And like I said, Lars is as unlucky as shit. It was really solid planning. Choice Scarf Lando could have taken this game at the end given the right predictions. Like, instead of going for the Earth Power, predicting the Lopunny to switch out, going for the U-turn, making some really bold plays could have possibly won him the game. I liked how he used Scizor so well this game. It got him a lot of momentum with his U-turn core. And this is what happens when you've got a really good pair of mons that can U-turn or Volt-turn or whatever you want to call it. He's able to just constantly force John to switch while just bring in both things that can U-turn, and it's just whittling down the opponent's team without really having to do much. You're just clicking U-turn, but your opponent has to switch out. I mean, he played relatively safely. He didn't make any predictions in the early game. Like, he wasn't making any aggressive plays, but then towards the mid-game, he was able to make some more aggressive predictions, take down the Lando T, the Cryogonal, and the end game came down to a bunch of 50-50s, and it also came down to a basically 50-50 roll, and Lars lost them, and because of that, Lando took a huge HP ice, and then he just got swept by Mega Lopunny. I think he played this game very well, maybe a little bit too safely, and no big plays at the end to try to secure the win. Again, those big plays were kind of 50-50s, so it was a really close match.
I would have liked to see Lars preserve some of his mons a little bit better. In particular, the Aromatisse and the Hitmonlee. I mean, the Aromatisse, he used it to switch in early on and then didn't use the opportunities he had to heal it back up. I understand he wanted damage on things, but at that point, I mean, Mega Lopunny just looked like a huge threat for his team in general, and Aromatisse with his Rocky Helmet was being able to get up some damage on it at least, and be able to switch into the fake outs, quick attacks and stuff like that. So I'd have liked to see him maybe try and wish it up. And similarly with the Hitmonlee, I potentially would have preferred to see him maybe sack off the Scizor, because he had other ways to try and deal with the Reuniclus. In particular, he mentioned in his team builder that Hitmonlee can turret carry Reuniclus, potentially if it's fully physically defensive, and it was specially defensive, so a choice banded high jump kick would have been able to just get a kill at that point. I do really like the prep. I mean, everyone underestimates how powerful Hitmonlee actually is. Reckless high jump kick is no joke. I like the set that he brought, it's just sad he didn't get to do more work. And the Scarf Landos was really, really good. I like how he predicts John's speed creeps, and so brings things like the modest Mega Alakazam with enough speed for Adamant Lopunny. I think Lars's prep was really good, but when it came to the actual match, he didn't use the Mons for their intended purpose. Like, Aromatisse was his Lopunny check, and he let it go down way too early and didn't try and keep it healthy when he could have, which just meant that towards late game, he didn't have enough for John's speedy offensive threats, and that really cost him.
Alright, so at number 8, we have the Pittsburgh Piratas. And so why don't you talk about Tup?
Tup basically lost to a combination of good prep from Fizz and not paying attention to what's happening in the battle. And by that I mainly mean the whole Trick Room P2 scenario, when that was being an annoying Trick Room P2. He actually had a Powder which could have outslowed it. He also got caught out by the Scarflorges, stuff like that. It's one of those things where if Fizz had run 0 Vs and a minus speed nature in P2, I think it outflowed her Powder. Even so, he could have got up some sand damage on it. And in particular, it was not noticing that Florges was scarfed and losing extra drill to that. He went over in his own video what was wrong with his prep this week, and I have to agree. He didn't have the checks that he needed for Fizz's team, and if I see a P2 on the opposing team, I'm bringing knockoff on like 4 or 5 Mons. I believe he only had it on the Tentacle and didn't bring it on things like Tangrowth and stuff like that. And Tangrowth is a really good Mon for P2 to switch in on, because it traces your generator, it can double that, etc. So if you can catch that with a knockoff, P2 loses a lot of its viability by losing that item. The main thing with Tup this game is just that lack of concentration in the battle, a lack of noticing the little things about who switches out first, who goes first in Trick Room turns, and counting Trick Room turns properly and stuff like that, which I think he was possibly just a bit tired, or, you know, it is really difficult when you're playing on Wi-Fi to judge a lot of things, which is why Showdown's so much easier, because it literally tells you on screen how many turns things have left, what moves have been used, etc. I think Tup can turn around and can still make playoffs and still potentially make a run at the championship in the playoffs. He needs to fix up what went wrong with his prep this week, try and just remember to pay attention to every little detail that happens in a game and write it down to work out his best course of action.
I can understand why he was missing things, because it was like an hour-long match, and after an hour, you're just kind of like, what's going on? It's hard to pay attention to a Pokemon battle for an hour. Early game, I don't think he played well. He lost his only 2 water resists very early in the match, and that's going to cost you when you've got a very water-weak team. And that meant that whenever Fizz brought in, he could just spam water coverage, Hydro Pump on Salamence and whatever. I mean, there was some odd plays. Yeah, the P2, when the P2 was at a low amount of health, Hippo could outslow it and kill it. But again, I don't think he could know that, because he didn't know that P2 wasn't actually min-speed 0 IVs. So, I mean, it was worth a try at the very least. I guess the big thing is sacking off the Excadrill. Like, I know he didn't know Florges was scarfed, because how could he? Fizz had never revealed against anything that was scarfed. Offensive, yes, but not scarfed. When he switched in the Rotom, he has to pay attention to just it saying that Trick Room is ended, because Trick Room ends, he outspeeds the Rotom, and then he switches in the Excadrill, and then Excadrill goes down to HP Water, because at that point, it was revealed that it was scarfed, and that's something that you got to pay attention to. I mean, some other things. But again, I get it. Like, it's a long match, and so there were definite mid to late game misplays by Tup. So, I mean, overall, I think Tup didn't play poorly. Like, it wasn't that Tup made gigantic misplays aside from what probably the Excadrill. It's just he got out prepped, and then in the battle got outplayed by, you know, a no guard P2 and a Scarflorges, which you don't really expect. So at number 7, we have the Tampa Bay Lose Weights and Mono, and now I literally don't think those first 3 turns could have gone any worse. Like, he gets crit and then parried, and then full parried, And then he gets paired with
the scarfed
with the
Mandibuzz gets
Mandibuzz.
parried by Static.
The one time he brings Scarf Mandibuzz, it gets paired the first turn it's out. Like, that is absolutely terrible luck. Which I think is karma from last week against John, because he got a lot of hacks against John, and now the game just said, no, fuck you, Mono. You are not winning this game. But I do like that even after all of that happened, he kept a level head and still tried to win the game. Because it wasn't like he lost the game from turn 1. Yeah, he was put hugely on the back foot early game because that Azu could have done a lot more work. Outspeeding the Ampharos, hitting it with a play rough, which would have done a ton of damage. Getting at least a knockoff on the Jirachi would have done a ton of damage. Worn down a lot of Envy's team. But, without Azu, though, the job of taking out the Ampharos' Garchomp, he let that get whittled down, and then it went down after a little while. And without that, then, it's just, there's Restalk Ampharos. It just cleaned up. He was able to play this game well. He held his own against Envy despite getting hacked out the first 3 turns of the match. So,
I genuinely think that if he'd been playing a lesser opponent, someone who wasn't really freaking good at the game, then he could have played around that first couple of turns of hacks, but unfortunately Envy was too good to let that kind of momentum slip away from him. Crit para full para turn 1 is that's just what Jirachi does. It's the hacks god. Like, there's nothing you can really do about that. There's nothing a person can do about that. I think he didn't identify how important the Garchomp was, mostly because he basically just had to hope that the Ampharos didn't have rest. Unfortunately, it did, and he just had not enough to take it out. So it was just Mono got put in a really shitty position, and where a lot of people would have just clicked buttons and say they lost to hacks, Mono still played really, really well throughout the game.
So at number 6, we have the San Francisco Arcaniners, so why don't you talk about George?
George's prep this week was on point. Like, basically, it was as if he watched Dan's Team Builder and then laughed at all the things he said and brought those sets. So, Defog Mega Beedrill, he brought Icicle Spear on Mamoswine for the Yachi Berries that Dan had, didn't bring Freeze Dry on the Mamoswine, so the Yachi Berry and Rotom was completely useless, etc. He obviously used practice matches to work out that Sticky Web was a huge, huge problem, and he had to bring Defog to get rid of it, and played around that really, really well. Managed to get rid of the Galvantula using the Beedrill, and then bringing in a Defog on something which he knew could outspeed. So that was really, really smart from George. That set was perfect for what it needed to do, and it did exactly what it was supposed to. Unfortunately, he had absolutely nothing for Choice Banded V-Create. I mean, no one has anything for Choice Banded V-Create, but it's one of those things that he had the Snorlax to try and deal with it, and then decided to show off the Facade to try and get rid of the Rotom Wash, and at that point, if you watch Dan's commentary, Dan was saying he was being, absolutely predicted in that place. He goes for Will-O-Wisp and then Snorlax was Facade. The thing is, the Snorlax was so important just as something that could do a lot of damage and Pursuit Trap the Victini while switching in on a V-Crit, and just as a resist that doesn't take super effective damage from Bolt Strike. And he let it get whittled down. I did really like the Spiritomb set. I think Icy Wind was a smart move to bring, just so if he did have to risk it against the Mega Altaria, he could keep lowering its speed and make sure that he's Infernape outsped. He got a bit unlucky with rolls on things like the Gunshot with Infernape. I believe he said the calc was a 65% chance to Oko, plus Poison chance, plus crit chance, and then there's also the miss chance. He got a little bit unlucky there, but it happens. If that had gone in his favour, it might have been a different game, because he would have still had the Infernape to do a lot of damage, and without the Sticky Webs up, Dan didn't really have much, if anything, that could outspeed Infernape. So all in all, I think George prepped really, really well this week, but then because it was going so well for him early, got a bit caught up in showing off his prep, I guess is a way to put it. End up losing the game by losing that little bit of momentum, losing his only check to Victini, and then getting crit at the end game. It happens, but I think at that point, as we discussed with Dan probably still had the match. It would have required good players on both sides, but you can only theory mod at that point, and hacks happens. It's something you just have to deal with.
Yeah, the team matchup was pretty odd. He had to max all his spreads, which he never wanted to do, but because they had a lot of the same speed tiers, and he wanted to outspeed things with Mega Beedrill, at -1. There was a lot of maxing going on, so I don't think the prep could have been as efficient as it needed to be, just because it was a weird matchup. And I fucking knew it. I fucking knew it. He would run D5 Mega B-Drill. I said he was going to run it one of these weeks. He used it very well to keep the webs off the field. He let his checks to Bikini get too whittled down, and without any reliable switch-ins to a V-Create, it V-Creates all over his team. Like, it seems like he kind of played the same way as he did last week, a little bit too safely, not making any of these really big predictions or plays that we've known him to make, especially when he's kind of down. He probably shouldn't have sacked out Spiritomb, let Manaphy take the hit, and then he'd still have Spiritomb around to take care of the Metacham, but, you know, those are some different endgame plays he could have made. And the crit did lose George the game. Like, that, once the crit happened, George did lose the game at that point. That's not necessarily to say that he would have won had the crit not happened. Again, I still think Dan could have had it, but overall, it was just, I think he's not making the bold plays that we've seen in the early season, and he just wasn't able to take this game. So at number 5, we have Miguel and the Real Maril. So this week, it was solid planning. I like the Yuki set. T-Wave and Memento, pretty good. You know, Yellow Magic, very good. Kind of wanted the game at the end, but you know. Rock Polish Golurk is cool. It doesn't outspeed a lot, even at +2, like a Choice Scarf Latias. I'm pretty sure it doesn't outspeed. He used Registeel well to whittle down a lot of Geo's team early. I mean, Geo's just kind of letting it sit in the field and then do things. And I like the set as well because it actually could 1v1 a Ditto. Focus Blast is not going to do much to an actual Registeel. It will do a lot more to Ditto, which has a lot less HP. And yeah, he got played by the Natural Gift Grassberry. Maybe he should have scouted for it, but I don't know. If this was like 2 seasons ago, I would say there was no way he would ever see that coming. But at this point, it's like Natural Gift is one of those moves that you like on Mons because it's now getting predictable. Not super predictable, but it's something that you can see coming now. And I like how the whole time he was trying to set up for the Golurk sweep, you know, whittling down certain Mons, he wasn't able to get the Regirock down at all, but he was able to use the Golurk to punch big holes in Geo's team. And he's got to do his calcs. Like, do your calcs, man. In battle, do your calcs. I know he was like, oh, if I did the calcs, I would have gone for this move. Then do the calcs. I guess he just kind of seemed like absent-minded during this battle. He forgot things that, like, I don't think you would normally forget in battle, or at least Miguel normally wouldn't forget in battle, but he just, like, but he's still able to, like, claw a victory. I mean, the Para put himself back in the game when he was probably going to lose to E-Speed and Sacred Fire. You know, it wasn't the I guess, strongest win we've seen from him, but you know, it was still a win nonetheless. And I mean, he's pulled back this season a lot. I mean, 6-4 is much better than what he was doing, and I think he's on a 3-game win streak. So you know, he's doing well, and I think he's just going to keep it up for the last 2 weeks.
As much as Natural Gift has become much more standard in League format, like, there was no way you could have expected it from Geo, because we haven't seen Geo use it this season yet, and we haven't seen him use it too much in previous seasons. So I can see why you would just leave in Blastoise on Entei, because, like, normally it's a great check to it. My biggest criticism of Miguel is the thing you mentioned with calcs. Just so you can learn everything you can about your opponent's team. And Miguel just doesn't do that. He doesn't write down things that he sees. He never tries to scout out particular moves and stuff like that, but he doesn't scout entire sets as much as he could. It's honestly my biggest criticism of him this entire season. Is just something that I know a lot of other people do really well. Geo does it well, and he just doesn't consider it much, and it's something that I think can potentially be pivotal in a particular game. The planning was pretty cool, but I mean, Golurk is just a monster. I absolutely love Golurk. It's one of those mons where it's always going to be difficult to pull off the sweep just because it is so slow to begin with. You have to get a really good opportunity to sweep, and I like how he brought Memento to try and facilitate that. You get something down to -2, and then Golurk is bulky enough to take most hits at -2 that aren't like stab super effective, and once it gets set up, it's sort of hard to stop. So I really like that in his planning.
So at number 4, we have the Atlanta Hawluchas and Fizzy. So you can talk about Fizz.
I really wanted to put Fizz higher because he makes just the best team builders I've ever seen.
No, I was disappointed in his team builders. This week, the team builder was terrible. Fizz, what are you doing?
I like how he accidentally deleted Zap Cannon and then had to retype it back in and always put Zen Headbutt. That was my favourite part. One of the big things with the game this week was Fizz managed to bluff. Use the Zoroark to bluff that it was Florges, like Zoroark does, but really caught Top off guard with it and successfully got rid of the Tentacruel basically with Knockoff. And part of that was seeing Florges use Knockoff, which was really cool because it actually has freaking binds and stuff. Fizz's team this week was just fucking... It's as if he just tripped out and then was like, I'm just gonna bring some really weird shit and I'm gonna win this game. And he did. And while I love the fact that he brought Trace to trace the No Guard, and the fact that in the game he waited until Mega Pidgeot had Mega'd out before switching in P2 so he could get the traces, I think it would have been smarter to have one accurate move and one inaccurate move. So for example, run Zap Cannon and then Ice Beam, or vice versa, run Blizzard and then Thunderbolt. So that if you don't trace the No Guard, or if you have to sack something to let Mega Pidgeot Mega Evolve, you can still switch in the P2 and can still just kill it with Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, whatever you chose. He made aggressive plays when he knew he sort of had to and when he knew he could. So it was one of those, he had a little bit of momentum and then used things like the Florges and used the Trick Room really, really well to just put Tup on the back foot and get rid of a lot of the threats to his team. And once he'd torn through enough of Tup's team, Volcanion just comes in and clicks Steam Eruption and everything dies. So
I think it was nice scouting for the knockoff and Tentacruel. Like, Tup brings in Tentacruel on the P2, and he's like, well, this probably has knockoff. I'm just going to switch into my Salamence because I know that the Yachi Berry is not going to be that useful, so, it's good scouting. And then the P2 was just used so well, and like you said, I don't think both inaccurate moves were necessary because Mega Pidgeot can take hits, but not that many hits. Yeah, and the plays to take up both Rotom, H, and Excadrill were great. I mean, I don't think Tup should have sacked off the Excadrill, but then again, long match. He took advantage of that, able to kill off the Excadrill, and once then, he won because there was only Hippowdon left, and he's got the Steam Eruption button in the back. So overall, he had a weird, the team was weird. Choice Scarf Florges and a No Guard P2, Zap Cannon Blizzard P2, and it just paid off in spades. And I think Fizz does gimmicks very well. He tests them out and he makes sure that the gimmicks he's bringing can actually do work. I really like the team. The gimmicks worked out very well, so Fizz got himself a pretty good victory. At number 3, we have the Boston Red Sox. He had some interesting sets. Sub Venusaur is pretty cool, but it doesn't have enough coverage for everything, so it's not going to be able to hit something on Tom's team. And with Sub Venusaur, it looked like it was going to be able to hit the Cobalion, so, And the Gator set was also good. It was able to set up on Milotic. You just can't really kill it because it's a Milotic, and Milotic is bulky as hell. But he didn't really hold any momentum throughout this battle. He was playing fairly safely. He let Jolteon just get pivoted on. He let Darmanitan go down. He's just letting Tom pivot around his entire team, and he's like, it's fine. Okay, Jolteon's getting willed, but that's fine. And then he sets up with Gator, and he just wins because Tom sacked off his entire team. Had Milotic taken the hit and then taken out Gator, I don't think Jolteon was at enough HP to kill everything after rocks and toxic damage. It'd have to switch in and out. So this wasn't a convincing win because I'm pretty sure that Tom could have won. And there were just some weird plays by Nick, just letting Darmanitan and Jolteon just get super whittled down. Yeah, I really don't have much to say. Just kind of got handed a victory.
Yeah, I guess the way I put it is Nick didn't win this match, Tom lost it. Because if everything had gone according to plan, there was no way Nick could win from that point. Provided, if Melodic had gotten parried multiple times in a row, then he wins still. But, hacks is hacks. I'm not sure how I feel about Quick Feet Jolteon. It's a cool set to bring, and it could definitely put in work, but the fact that it's toxic, I guess if you're bringing a Life Orb Jolteon, it's the same kind of thing of you just constantly wearing down your own Mon. But in this case, with the toxic, given Tom just kept pivoting around it with the Gligar Milotic, it racked up quite a lot of damage, and with the stealth rocks, I wasn't really able to do much. So I'm not really sure the prep was the best this week. I would like to see, potentially Pangoro instead of the Damatan, for example.
So number 2, we have the San Diego Chim Chargers, so you can talk about MV.
MV didn't bring Agility Ampharos this week for one of the few times ever in this league that he hasn't brought Agility Ampharos. I mean, we went over it with Mono. He got crazy hacks first couple of turns, and then just kind of sat on that momentum. He didn't have to do any crazy plays, didn't have to use any insane sets, because at that point he'd done enough to Mono's team just with that hacks that he didn't need to do anything insane. He still made good plays, so things like sacking the Gyarados to the Garchomp, knowing that it has to go for 2 hits, pivoting around the Garchomp really well, predicting, the Stone Edge first so it goes into Donphan, then predicting the Earthquake and goes into Togekiss. It was really good just to rack up a little bit of chip damage on that Garchomp and managing to get his rocks up and stuff like that. So even though I say he didn't make exceptional plays, he still played every turn well, he still made the correct play, but there was no high risk, high reward play that he had to make because he just rode the momentum to the end. The team was much, much less set up than we've seen in previous weeks, which I think is possibly after last week's game against Nick. He's noticed that people are going to be expecting him to set up, and so he's trying out a couple of different playstyles so that in the playoffs he can potentially catch people a bit more off guard. Because at this point, MV is, I believe, guaranteed to go to playoffs, or at least very, very close to guaranteed to go to playoffs.
I think the biggest thing is, he switched up his planning this week. What much less hyper-offensive, less setup, more balance, more bulky offense. And, that's what I've been saying. He does the same playstyle every single week, and it's good to see that I'm actually being able to change it up. It means that his playstyle becomes a lot less predictable. Granted, that's what his team is kind of made for, is just setup. He got really lucky those first few turns. And that's not to say he would have lost if those turns didn't happen. Those kind of early game hacks, that's not to say those hacks don't happen, Mono would have won. Not at all. There's a lot more to the game to play if those didn't happen. But he's able to keep up the momentum once he had it, and he had it from the beginning. So, overall it was a well-played game. The luck in the beginning just kind of ensured that he had the momentum and didn't have to make any crazy plays or predictions. So at number 1, we have the Philadelphia Scizors, and this was another really big win for Chimp, which, it's crazy how far ahead he is compared to some people. He is, MV has plus 18 differential, Chimp has plus 29 differential.
Plus 29 in 8 wins is insane.
Yeah, and he's on, what, now, a 7-game win streak? He's doing really, really well. I really like his planning this week. He brought the rain for the second time this season. I think the last time he brought it was against Miguel, week 2? This is also the second time he brought Kingdra. It's actually cool to see Kingdra actually sweep. It's one of the only things Kingdra does well is rain sweeper. And Chimp did what he does best. He wore down the team. He knew that Kingdra was going to be his win condition. He knew he had to get rid of Empoleon. And so he made sure to get that out of the way before he sent in Kingdra and set up. But he realized, midway through, he's like, well, I can pretty much just send in Kingdra, I can set up a Dragon Dance, and then, as long as the rain stays up, I just sweep the team. So, Chimp got another sweep, and he's doing this really well, and I don't think there's any surprise that he's still number 1, because, goddamn, this is the second week in a row he swept someone. But yeah, he's doing really well. I honestly don't have anything else to say.
So, Chimp basically all season has had people bring things for a rain team, and then he hasn't brought rain. And then now, towards the end of the season, people are convinced he's not bringing rain, and then he brings rain. It's just insane prep. It's like he predicts what people are going to predict of his team, and then counter teams that, which is just insane to think about, the mind games. I think how he prepped was really, really smart, and again, he didn't have to do anything insane playing-wise, because he had it all built into the team. And this is the difference between league format, is you can have a game 1 at team matchup, depending on the prep of both coaches. I'm not going to say it was quite that bad this week, but certainly Chimp is a good enough player that once he has an advantage in the team matchup like he had this week, he's able to just exploit it, and there really isn't much that someone like Coop can do to avoid that. Yeah, there really isn't too much to add about this game. He just played everything the way he should have. Kingdra just destroyed Cooper's team, and Chimp managed to get rid of Empoleon, which was sort of the only thing that could potentially deal with it.
So that is going to wrap up the Week 10 power rankings for the GBA Season 6. If you have your own power rankings, as always, please leave them down in the comment section below. Trav, anything to say?
Fuck Jirachi.
Fuck Jirachi. So that is all we got for this week, and we will see you all next week.
Bye.
Yay, outros.